Miami's recent magic ran out against the rebuilding Pistons, but was this just a tired, short-handed team coming up flat, or a potential problem the Heat really need to fix? And can Miami get Kyle Lowry to revisit the Fountain Youth? We'll break all that down next here on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks.com and use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It should have been an easy game against the Detroit Pistons. Miami wrapping up a 4-game road trip. Unfortunately, they were taking on the Detroit Pistons team who had lost 14 straight and apparently had nothing to lose. And they came out with more effort, more intensity, and they were able to knock off the Miami Heat 100-90. Again, a 14-game losing streak coming to an end for the Pistons as they eliminate the Miami Heat. The Heat shot just 38%, 31% from three. A lot went wrong today for Miami, West, but there was a defining moment, if not exactly a possession, that I think really sums up the night for the Heat. After being down by as much as 12 early in the fourth quarter, a Kyle Lowry layup, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. He closed the gap to 5 with the Heat gaining momentum and the score at 83-88. The Pistons miss a 3. The Heat rebound the ball and get fouled in the process. Then Gabe Vincent misses a 3. Kyle Lowry rebounds. Duncan Robinson misses a 3. Max Strus rebounds. Then Lowry misses a 3. This time, Cade Cunningham grabs the board, and Saddiq Bey, who led the Pistons with 26 points, knocks down a 3, and the Heat never seemed to be able to muster the effort to cut it closer than that. The Pistons tried to give the game away. There was a reason why they've lost 14 straight. They were really bad down the stretch, but the Heat just had no energy, no intensity, and unfortunately wound up losing the game. Again, 190 as the Heat fall to the Detroit Pistons. Where do we start with this? I think the obvious point is probably Kyle Lowry, who would needed to step up tonight for the Heat, but didn't necessarily do that.
That was a great opportunity for Lowry to make that 3 and cut that lead from 5 to a 2-point possession game. Instead, it's an 8-possession game. You nailed it, David. That was the swing point of the game. That was the Heat kind of clawed back into it, and that was the moment when you miss 3 wide open threes on one possession. I mean,
demoralizing.
It was a tough night for the Heat shooting wise in general, but I mean,
Right.
what are the odds of that even happening?
Wide open shots, all of them too.
Open.
None of them were contested in the least. It was unbelievable. And again, yeah, you lose your win there. You lose any kind of intensity at that point when you're making all this effort to grab the board. You swing it out to a wide open shooter, and they wind up clanking it off the rim. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean Kyle Lowry in particular, 2 for 9 from 3-point range tonight, 3 for 12 overall. And there's been a question, especially with these injuries that the Miami Heat are dealing with right now. Kyle Lowry, sort of your lone star, still around, and you're down Jimmy Butler, you're down Bam Adebayo, you're without Tyler Herro. PJ Tucker leaves the game midway through the game, and we'll touch on that later on in the show. But the Heat just simply need more from Kyle Lowry, and I understand that he wants to get guys involved. Okay, let me start with that. Kyle Lowry is not going to beat a Pistons team, even a Pistons team as bad as this one, by himself. I understand that. I understand you want to feed Max Strus because he's hot. I understand you want to get your teammates involved. But to take just 12 shots in a game where you're without your co-stars, when PJ Tucker leaves midway through it, you're taking one more shot than Gabe Vincent, one more shot from struggling Duncan Robinson. Max Strus is taking 4 more shots than you in 8 fewer minutes. I don't see how you can get away with that if you're Kyle Lowry and if you're the Miami Heat. And there's been this conversation about, hey, the Heat need Toronto Raptors Kyle Lowry now more than ever. I just don't know that Kyle Lowry exists right now, David. I don't think it's as simple as Kyle just flipping a switch in his head and be like, you know what? Yeah, I should just run it back and be more like Toronto Raptors Kyle Lowry. I don't think that player is there. And I'll tell you why, because there was a number of shots that he just missed that he would have made 2-3 years ago. There was a couple times where he's trying to turn the corner. One of the big things that he did in Toronto, he would lead the league. He would be among the top players in the league in drives per game, and that's just not the case right now in Miami. Some of it's just the way the offense works, right? There's a lot more side-to-side stuff in Miami than there was in Toronto, but he's just not getting the same burst. He's not getting around the edge the way that he did. There were a couple times where the Pistons would just sort of, a Pistons defender would just sort of stop, take one step in Kyle Lowry's direction, and he would just give the ball up. He wouldn't try to.
Yeah.
There was no burst to try to get around him. That first step isn't what it used to be. And look, I understand he's 35 years old. I get that this is what happens, but I think I think we need to really acknowledge the fact that the aging process has caught up to Kyle Lowry, and Toronto Kyle Lowry just might not be available for them.
My counter to that, and I agree with you 100%, it's a sad, not turn of events necessarily, but it's not great to see Lowry not be able to do the things that we were so accustomed to seeing him do. However, I will say there's no way he should be playing 42 minutes against the Detroit Pistons at age 35. And a big part of why he's doing so is because of all the players that are out due to injury, because PJ Tucker gets lost, because you don't have anybody else who can really handle the ball to any kind of extent other than spurts of KZ Opala and Gabe Vincent. And that's basically the extent of your rotation. Now, Marcus Garrett played, got his first points in the NBA today on a nice spin move. That was great to see. But when it comes to Kyle Lowry, I don't know. I think he's being asked to do too much. But he's not even thriving in that role. And I think that's where your point really hits home, is that in the opportunities that he has, some of them easy, he's not really capitalizing there. And given his experience, given the fact that he's carried a team to an NBA championship, he should know what it takes. He should be able to do these things. Some of these shots, wide open shots, it has nothing to do with old legs, tired legs, a road trip, or anything else. You should be able to knock this down.
Right.
You've been playing X number of years in the NBA at this point. You should be able to do it. And I know the excuse is, well, he's 35. And it's a good one. It's a legitimate reason why he wouldn't be able to perform at a high level. And yet, there have been too many games like this where you could just say, wow, he looks old. He does not look like the Lowry of old. And that's a concern for the Miami Heat. And I don't know what Miami could do because, again, it's not like they're going to make a change. They're not liable to trade Lowry anytime soon. We've talked about this at great length. I suggested to you kind of half-heartedly before the game even started that maybe Lowry could come off the bench just because he seems to thrive with these secondary unit guys that can shoot, push the pace a little bit, and kind of just take the ball out of Lowry's hands as far as scoring is concerned. I'm not sure if that's a realistic approach either because, well, he's Kyle Lowry.
I mean, you need him for defensive purposes and the communication that he brings to that starting lineup and all those things. And, I understand why you say it was sort of a half-hearted thing. You don't have to bring him off the bench. You can just, when you're staggering your minutes throughout the game, you can just have him play with these guys. Just to poke holes in my own argument here, I mean, there are signs that Kyle Lowry hasn't aged way too far beyond the point of sort of not being that all-star level player, right? He's actually shooting 78% within 3 feet of the basket, which is a crazy efficient number. The problem is that he's only shooting 11% of his shots in that range, which is a career low.
He can't get to the rim,
because he's not getting to the rim as much, right? And it's sort of like, can he not get to the rim, or is this sort of more of a function of Miami's offense not asking him to get to the rim as much? Probably a little bit of both, right? It's probably a little bit of both. Maybe there is some. I don't know. Was he not able to turn the corner tonight because it was the end of a long road trip, or was he not able to turn the corner tonight and get to the basket as much because he's 35 years old? Maybe that's also a little bit of both, right? Maybe that at Kyle Lowry at 32, being at the end of a long road trip wouldn't have bothered him as much as Kyle Lowry at 35 years old. Again, very logical, reasonable reason here. But there were times in that fourth quarter too where, and this is why I just asked the question, does Toronto Kyle Lowry even exist anymore? Because there were times in the fourth quarter where it looked like he was just like, yeah, you know what? I am going to take this game over. And there was a point in the middle of the fourth quarter where he got to the basket 2 times in a row and then did it a third time and got to the free throw line. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the Kyle Lowry that they need. He just missed a bunch of free throws. The Heat in general missed a ton of free throws, and that was a problem. But I'm just asking the question simply, does Toronto Raptors era Kyle Lowry even exist anymore? Is that something that he can get? Because you go back to that stat line, 19 points and 10 assists. This game was begging for 29 points and 10 assists, right? And if you're paying Kyle Lowry $30+ million a year, that should be there somewhere, right? It's 19 and 10 is fine. Most people will be like, yeah, that's fine. Spoelstra will probably say, you know what? That's fine. We need to just make shots overall. We need to make free throws. Miami, by the way, got dominated in the paint. Yeah.
That's what you say about Larry. Well, he was impacting the game in multiple ways.
Yeah.
It's like, going
It's
25% from the
great.
floor. Yeah, that's not great, though.
No, but it's like good. Impact the game in a lot of ways, but you should also be impacting it with
Also, yeah.
points.
Yep.
Like that, 29 and 10. This was the night for Kyle Lowry to put that lineup, not 19 and 10. I know now we're just like we're putting it all on Kyle Lowry, and he's the only guy that's even available right now. So maybe it's a little unfair, but again, it's just a question worth asking. Does Toronto Raptors Kyle Lowry even exist for Miami right now?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I'd say he is available in bursts, and that's the sad reality is that we're going to see less and less of these bursts over the next 2 years of his contract. And that's kind of what you take on when you embrace a player this age. Like Miami has a modus operandi. They've got a way of building teams. They wanted to get a guy who would make up for a lot of the inefficiencies at the point guard position, particularly defensively. And Lowry has certainly done that, leading the league in charges. But you're going to have to sacrifice some of the offense. And they weren't counting on missing Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Caleb, everybody else that's been out so far, Victor Oladipo. Like that's a bulk of your scoring potential that's not available on this lineup right now. I mean, this would probably be a completely different outcome if Tyler was in the game. If Bam's in the game, certainly I think you would have a completely different outcome. And
they're putting a lot on Kyle right now.
Right. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about Max Strus. He's certainly turned a corner. I think he's become an important part of Miami's rotation moving forward, no matter what happens with the rest of the players that do come back from injury. When we'll talk about that and the injury to PJ Tucker in the next segment. But first, wanted to tell all of you about Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is a new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Truebill has over 2 million users and helps save them over $100 million. You could be next. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Who doesn't want that around the holidays? Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA.
Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. All right, Max Strus is having a moment, David. 32 points over the weekend. Was Miami's most impactful scorer tonight in that loss against Detroit. 24 points on 7 for 16 shooting, 4 of 11 from three-point range. Came out, started nailing threes right away, right where he left off from that 32-point performance. And now we're getting a lot of conversation, and the little whispers of, hey, should the Heat start Max Strus over Duncan Robinson? Is Max Strus actually the better three-point sniper, the better three-point specialist for the Heat than Duncan Robinson? And tonight was a stark contrast between Duncan Robinson and Max Strus. Duncan Robinson, 2 for 10 from three-point range. Strus, 4 from 11. Strus, 24 points, 6 points for Duncan Robinson. That's a conversation that we can have, but it's not a conversation that I want to have. And I'm going to steal your Monday Madness music here, David.
All right, go for it.
I am so sick of this conversation about how the Heat can only have one three-point specialist. It's either or between Duncan Robinson and Max Strus. Hey, newsflash, it's 2021. It's the modern NBA. Maybe you should have more than one guy who can hit a three-pointer on your team. Having both Duncan Robinson and Max Strus seems like a good thing to have. There are nights where Duncan Robinson, like the shooting slump that plagued Duncan Robinson to open the season, that's over. But it's not going to be like he's not going to go 6 for 10 every night from beyond the arc either. You're going to have nights like this when you're a three-point specialist. Max Strus is having a moment right now. He's in the zone. That doesn't mean you need to write off Duncan Robinson. And what I loved tonight, David, was that Eric Spoelstra, he didn't have any other options, played Max Strus and Duncan Robinson together a whole lot more often than he did before the season. Eric Reed had the stat on the broadcast. 64 minutes total prior to tonight. They played a bulk of their minutes together tonight, Strus and Robinson did. And there was this great play, Duncan Robinson attacking the closeout, whipping that Steve Nash kind of kick-out pass out to Max Strus, Strus nailing that three. The more spacing you have on the floor, the better. I took a photo of it and I tweeted it. Like during that second quarter when the Heat were really playing well, I thought the entire offense was 5 out, basically, because you got Dwayne Dedmon who can also space the floor.
Right.
I think that's a great offensive system when you're without your mid-range guys with Bam and without Jimmy. And you kind of need more than just one 3-point shooter to do it. So this whole conversation about pinning Max Strus against Duncan Robinson, just stop it. Just stop it. There's no point to have it. Just have 2 good 3-point shooters on the team. That seems like a good thing.
All right. I'm going to have the conversation anyway, though. So
Okay.
I've got to take it from there because I think like we're getting these comments, we're getting feedbacks. We had a recent episode of our show on YouTube, which everybody listening to this show, whether you're watching it on YouTube or not, you should be subscribed to our show as well. But anyway, we posted a comment, I think a discussion about Duncan Robinson and everything else that he's been doing. And I think a response was, well, Max can do so much more than what Duncan can do. And I think that's where the conversation starter is that we're starting to see Duncan kind of relegated to just being a 3-point shooter. He's been evolving of late. He's been incorporating the mid-range jumper. I think you tweeted something out about that as well. We saw some passing on display tonight, but I think the point overall stands that maybe Strus is a little bit more versatile. However, on the defensive end, I like what Duncan can provide much more consistently than what Max can do. However,
which isn't
Max
saying that's a lot, but
yeah, that's right.
It speaks to how bad Strus can be defensively sometimes. It's a good point.
Right. But I think fans, and maybe there's something to it. I don't really agree with this, but I think they like Strus's overall effort just a little bit more than Duncan's, and Duncan being so foul prone, whether it's by reputation or because he just does wind up getting his hand caught in the cookie jar more often than any NBA player should. I think that's why a lot of people wonder whether or not he should be starting. And a guy like Strus, who seems to be making more out of less talent, if you can possibly say that about Duncan Robinson, I don't know. But either way, he's just, I don't know. There's a conversation there because I think this fans watch Strus and they see that he can dunk. They see that he can get to the rim on occasion, that he's providing more effort than what Duncan can do because that's not Duncan's role. And they think to themselves, I think Duncan can go to the bench. I think Max can start. Is there any possibility?
No, I think it's possible. I think that somewhere down the road, Max Strus could end up being like, who's to say that Max Strus couldn't end up being the better player than Duncan Robinson? They both are starting from the same place, being undrafted, you know? I get it. I think Strus has a ton of potential, right? 6'10" wingspan. He's much bigger in person than you think, right? I don't know. I just don't understand why all of a sudden there's sort of this conversation about trade Duncan Robinson because you have Max Strus. It just seems to me like
you don't want him on this roster. If he fans, I'll put this out, and not to add to Monday Madness here, which we'll save for tomorrow's episode, Tuesday Terror, maybe. Either way, if you don't want Duncan Robinson here on this Heat roster, where you have the best coach in the NBA that can maximize what Duncan can do, that has carved out a niche for him to thrive, to become the player that gets paid X number of millions of dollars, he's not going to go anywhere else and find immediate value. No team, even the Sacramento Kings, as dysfunctional they are going to be like, hey, you know what? We can take Duncan Robinson and make him an all-star here. They can't do it with Buddy Hield. They're not going to be able to do it with Duncan Robinson.
The other thing that we need to talk about here, and it's kind of the weird, uncomfortable part of this conversation, it's the 2 white guys on the team.
I said it last time, too. It was the same conversation about Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard.
Nobody wants to have, you know who we're not talking about right now is Gabe Vincent. Isn't he supposed to also be a 3-point specialist? Like, that's why he's on an NBA roster. He's been shooting better of late. 1 for 6 tonight against Detroit. Nobody's comparing Strus to Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson to Gabe Vincent. When Gabe Vincent has a great game like he has, when Gabe Vincent has had his moment like he has over the last week and a half, nobody's talking about putting Gabe Vincent in the starting lineup instead of Duncan Robinson. It's just the 2 white guys. I don't understand why we're putting these 2 teammates against each other. You should just have as much 3-point shooting on the floor on your roster as possible. I love what they did with the 5-out offense. I'd like to see it more even when Jimmy and Bam come back. Put Duncan Robinson and Max Strus on the court together. Let's stop pinning them against each other. Just embrace having 2 good 3-point shooters on the team.
Agreed. Anyway, Strus is thriving. He's having some big moments. Personally, I think he's also a fan of Locked On Heat, where I said that maybe he was just a player who hasn't really lived up to his potential since the start of the season. But, maybe not. I don't know. I don't want to necessarily take credit for his recent scoring outburst. But we should talk a little bit about PJ Tucker because, unfortunately, he took a hard foul. Was it in the third quarter when he fell? He was challenging a layup, came down on the ground crashing, wound up stretching his knee, and immediately walked towards the sideline there, and did not come back into the game at any point. The Heat announcing that he would be out for the rest of the game with a knee injury. I wasn't aware that it was a knee injury at the time of the fall, but there could be a potential for him to miss even more time. Miami hosts the Indiana Pacers for the first of a 3-game homestand on Tuesday. That's a Pacers team that, despite the obvious problems that they've been having with their coaching staff, with their roster, with the impending doom of a rebuild soon, looming large,
Mhm.
they're still a pretty good team, and they've still got a lot of size where you could use a
Right.
guy like PJ Tucker to defend them. So Miami has some issues to work through over the next couple of days.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. You hope that PJ Tucker doesn't have to miss any time. We're not going to know until probably tomorrow whether and how that knee responds and things like that. But without PJ Tucker, you're kind of just looking at KZ Okpala at your power forward spot. If that's it, Jimmy Butler doesn't come back. Jimmy can obviously play up into the fourth spot. So we'll see, right? I think the
Right.
Heat are still hopeful to get some guys back. But man, wouldn't that would just be a bummer? Like, finally, we get Jimmy Butler back. Maybe Tyler Herro comes back, but now you're down PJ Tucker. It's just, you really just want this team to get healthy at some point and kind of be
Yeah.
rolling. But it's just not happening. And again, you hope for the best with PJ Tucker and this knee injury. We'll see. We should know more by tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Even if we do wind up getting everybody healthy, there are some larger concerns regarding the Miami Heat. Their schedule, which we had previously thought would be a given or a gimme for Miami because they were facing some sub 500 opponents, seems a lot harder, a lot more challenging than we had expected. We'll talk about that in the next segment, even if they wind up playing those. However, there is a COVID issue around the NBA that we will talk about as well. But first, let me remind all of you about this holiday season's best treat. That's Built Bar. You know what? Everybody loves the holidays. Everybody loves all the foods that you can eat during the holidays. But let me tell you, sometimes you just want something a little different, something low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. If that's the case, you want the best of both worlds, which means you want something delicious and healthy. You want something like Built Bar. So many flavors, you'll have a hard time choosing. You can get a mixed box with all of your favorites. Get some that you want, get some that you don't necessarily want, and you share those with coworkers, friends, families. You'll be the hit at every holiday party. If you're looking for that extra fuel and that boost that you need when you're going through malls for last minute shopping, or you're trying to get from one family to the other to visit them all during the holidays, Built Bar is the snack for you. You can just put it in your jacket or your purse, and you'll never know you need it, and you'll always have it on you. That's the benefit of having something like Built Bar. People are so passionate about their favorite flavor. I can't wait to hear all of you in your comments and tell us what your favorite flavors from Built Bar are. And you know what? During the holidays, you can dip that Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa to add an extra little bit of spice and flavor to it. It's a great combination. You can't go wrong with that. So go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off, but only at built.com. Bet Online has you covered all season for more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football season continues, the march to the playoffs, the Dolphins winning again. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus from basketball, football, NHL to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts, and don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter. Use the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review, whether it's on YouTube or iTunes or however you get this show. Please make sure to subscribe or subscribe to all of them. Why not? That's all just a click away. We're so close to our goal. We wanted to reach this goal before the end of the year, and so much of you have gone and supported us, and I'm hoping that you'll continue to do so if you haven't already. But anyway, Eric Spoelstra was asked pregame about the importance of building equity with so much unknown around the league, having to make sure that you secure wins against these sub 500 teams. And he absolutely confirmed that was the case. You want to be able, look, that's the approach all season long, regardless of what's going on with the uncertainty of COVID or anything else. So you're going up against a winning team or a losing team. It doesn't matter. You're trying to get as many wins as possible. But yeah, it's great to get wins against bad teams. It's what you should be able to do. Unfortunately, we're starting to see a little bit of a trend here where teams like the Orlando Magic played it really closely, even though they were missing more than half their roster. They had to make a bunch of call-ups for the G League. They signed guys due to the hardship waiver there. They were able to pick up all these players. I don't even know they'd ever been on an NBA roster before, and yet they were on the roster. They challenged the Heat team. If not for a fantastic performance from Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, I'm not sure that Miami wins against the Orlando Magic today. They didn't get that performance from Vincent. They didn't get it from Kyle Lowry. They got it from Strus, and they lost to the Detroit Pistons. And you're thinking to yourself, well, you've got a lot of sub 500 teams coming to Miami or taking on the Heat over the next couple of weeks. A good time for Miami to pad the roster. I mean, pad their schedule, pad their wins, losses there. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a given anymore. You're
Right.
seeing how these teams are looking to compete. They're looking to play the spoiler role in December. Am I way off base here, Wes?
Well, look, it depends on when these guys come back. When do you get Jimmy back? When do you get Tyler back? But if there's going to be an extended absence, and of course with PJ Tucker, we just got done talking about,
Yep.
yeah, I don't think you can look at any of these games and take anything for granted. This is a team that's made up of a bunch of, without those guys,
Yep.
essentially a bunch of undrafted free agents. To say that this team is somehow more talented than those other teams is just
Right.
flatly inaccurate. I think
Right.
the expectations are better, are higher. I think the team
Sure.
overall is better. It's better coached. You're getting a lot of stuff from Strus and Duncan Robinson, things like that, but it's not like they're inherently more talented than any of the rosters coming into Miami or that the Heat face on this upcoming slate. What is it? 8 of the next 9 teams that they play are sub 500, and the one that's
Right.
above 500 is the Wizards, and nobody's scared of them. But uh, I, I don't know. It depends on whether or not those guys come back. I will say this. I know it's December, but the
Hmm.
broadcast made a point, and you're making the same point. It sounds like these teams that have these poor records, they kind of have nothing to lose right now. They're kind
Yep.
of in like prove it mode, and maybe that is something that could kind of be a trap for Miami. What looked like a soft portion of the schedule could end up being just a trap on the schedule for them. But there would be no
Absolutely.
excuse for that because you've got guys: Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. Hopefully, Caleb Martin comes back soon. By the way, we never even talk about him. Casey Okpala, Omer Yurtseven. It maybe sounds outlandish to say that they're playing for a job, but they are playing for their status in the NBA right now. There
Absolutely.
should be no reason why anybody takes the pedal off the gas or their foot off the pedal right now. They should be going full on, full throttle, and taking care of business against these teams. If they end up losing more than one of these games, I think it's an absolute disappointment.
And I will say, I've been making this a pretty consistent point all season long. This looks like a team that understands what's at stake, that does not
Yeah.
necessarily take their foot off the pedal here. And yet, without Jimmy Butler, without all the other guys that we've mentioned, it's a lot harder to muster this kind of concerted effort. Tonight's game, I think, is a pretty good example of that. It's a hard one for Miami because
Yeah.
you've got a Detroit team that's kind of frisky. Again, they've lost a lot of games. They're still trying to build something. They've got the energy of being mostly under 25. That roster, with the exception of Corey Joseph, I think is very, very, very young. And yet, they wound up challenging Miami in many ways that the Heat didn't expect it, and they were tired. They were gassed. And
I mean, it's
so,
a problem when you only got 9 guys available too. I mean, Detroit played 11 players tonight. Miami
yeah,
played 9 at the end of a long road trip. I mean, one of these losses was bound to happen. It just sort of sucks that you do it and now the Detroit Pistons snap their 14-game losing skid and you're the team that they did it against. I mean, that's a bummer, but one of these games was bound to happen.
I kind of feel bad for Indiana, to be honest with you, because this has always been a Miami team that when they take a punch like this, they come back and go, okay, we're going to show you that we're not the team
Yeah.
that just lost to the Detroit
I don't
Pistons.
feel
But
bad for Indiana.
yeah, good point. I do feel bad, however, for the rest of the league because
Yeah.
there are growing concerns. This is like NBA free agency and the drafts rolled into one. You've got Shams Charania and Adrian Wojnarowski tweeting almost constantly, unfortunately, about yet another player or coach or players and coaches that have entered the league's health and safety protocols. And it's a growing concern. More and more fans and peripheral media members saying, you know what, it's time for a pause, time for this, especially as they're leading up to what's their big marketing moment, the Christmas
Right. The
Day
Christmas
games.
Day.
Yeah, where you try to lure in all these fans on the periphery, guys that are fans that are just used to watching the NFL or college football. All of a sudden they go, oh, you know what? It's Christmas Day. Let's watch the Knicks. Let's watch the Lakers, etc. You're watching, I don't even know who's on this team. It's guys that are just come up from the G League or just signed again due to
Mhm.
hardship there. It's like, it's going to be a tough one for the league to figure out there. And yet, I don't see that a shutdown is likely to happen. We
No.
talked about this in a recent episode. I don't know that a pause is likely to happen. I don't know that it's going to make any kind of impact one way or the other if they do shut it down. Because again, this is part of the problem is that you're part of a society. We're part of a country that has kind of seemed, again, to use this for the third time this segment, taking their foot off the gas when it comes to COVID and all the issues. Yes, there is variance. There are all these other factors. And yet at the same time, I think by and large, as a society, we've kind of stopped really giving a shit about COVID. And so
Yeah.
you go out, you do what you want to. These are 25-year-old young men who want to be able to live their lives after a very stressful season last year. Um, I think you're just going to get more and more players who are going to test positive for this. And hopefully there'll be a change in the rules regarding asymptomatic players who are going to continue to be able to be out there. At least that's part of the discussion right now. There have been some talk about tightening off-court strategies and protocols and things of that sort. I don't know. We haven't gotten any kind of confirmation yet from the league regarding any potential changes. There's only been discussions right now, but I think the season is too far along. We have too much more information now than we did as opposed to 2 years ago when Rudy Gobert tested for the first time in mid-March of 2020. I don't think a league shutdown is happening anytime soon.
No, it's not, and it shouldn't. I mean, the people that are saying you've got to pause the season, you're just doing the up in arms thing on Twitter and just doing the fake outrage thing, or maybe it's real outrage. Maybe you actually do really care that the NBA takes a break. First of all, it's not happening before Christmas. You're like, well, they're not going to have any stars on Christmas. I mean,
Right.
at least it's better to have a game than no game.
Oh,
I mean, those
absolutely.
are the choices that you're left with if you're the NBA as a business. And like, again, I would say this. All right, pause the NBA season. For how long? What's the answer? What, the
Yeah.
NBA is supposed to solve the Omicron variant? Like, how long do you pause this thing? And it's not like these players are being entered in health and safety protocols for very just, kind of mild offenses against the whatever, whatever tracking, whatever they're doing. They're
Right.
doing it as a preventative measure, not as a response. And I think the NBA, it's taken a PR hit right now. It has. But we haven't really lost a huge star. Russell Westbrook was in there for a little bit and then popped right out of the protocols, and it was fine. But if Steph Curry, for example, gets lost for the Christmas Day game, now you've got to. But the NBA has not been shy about being like, what, the star players, they can just kind of go out there. We're going to ignore that one. They've done it.
Yeah.
It's been reported in Rolling Stone that they did that with Giannis in the finals last year. I'll go back to my original point here. What do you do if you're the NBA? You want to pause it? How long do you pause it? Until the coronavirus is over? Nobody knows when this is going to be over. Nobody knows what the response is going to be. It's not like these players are getting sick and unable to play. They're taking this as a preventative measure, not in response to a bunch of players being unable to actually play. To your point, they're sort of exploring what they want to do with that right now. I just don't like the pause doesn't even make sense. It's a solution to nothing. I just think people want to be fake outrage about a pause. It's not a solution to anything to pause the season.
I'll cop to this completely. I felt like that not too long ago, and yet the more I thought about it, it's like, what's going to change?
Nothing.
You're not going to prevent these guys from going out in public because the rules have already been laxed. You can't stop society from moving forward. And I go everywhere, and everywhere I go, there are people who have continued to walk around without masks, to not observe social distancing, et cetera. And maybe that's just Miami rules, although I think most of the country is falling into that same trap, unfortunately. And so you can't stop American society from moving on the way it does. I wish you could. And if that was the case, maybe we would have been able to stop this a long time ago. But then there would always have been somebody who would say, you know what, I don't believe in a vaccine, or I don't believe in wearing masks because it obstructs my breathing, et cetera. You can't stop the rest of the people from moving on as such. And so I just don't think you can stop the league. Again, we talked about this in the recent episode. The bubble isn't happening as much as I would like for it to, because it was a great opportunity to watch basketball again after a couple of months of a hiatus there. It's just not going to happen. It's just too expensive. It's too unwieldy. It costs too much. And right now you want to be able to bring fans back into the arenas. Look about that. I mean, we're talking about stopping games. Fans are still going. You want to be in an arena with 19,000 other fans, who some of them wear masks and most of them don't. I mean, that's how the virus spreads. It's not about 10 guys out on the court. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure we'll continue to see more names pop up. Luckily, the Heat have been really, really fortunate up to this point. They faced a Magic team that's missing a bunch of players. They faced a Bulls team that was missing a bunch of players. Who knows when their luck runs out? For now, that's why, to my point earlier, this is where you start to build that equity that Eric Spoelstra was asked about, because you need to be able to get these wins every time you have an opportunity. Miami blew a chance, but they'll move on, take on the Indiana Pacers on Tuesday. As always, we'll have a recap of that game tomorrow. We'll be answering more of your questions from around the league and about the Miami Heat here on Locked On Heat. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thank you so much for joining me, Wes.
Nostradamus, tomorrow.